got a couple of slides to facilitate our conversation today. So let me get those up on the screen. So I'm going to take you through a walk through three different pieces today. So I'm going to cover real quick on the new MCP tools. This is a new set of commands available in the MCP server for AI coding assistants to use to interface with WireMock Cloud. These open up a couple of new, interesting, and powerful use cases. One of them being API discovery that I'll have a demonstration for you today, as well as walking you through a few of the additional CLI updates that we have, which will include a demo of one of those updates in the CLI. So let's talk about the new MCP tools. So when we say MCP tools, just as a refresher, this is talking about the MCP server of WireMock Cloud that is part of the WireMock CLI. And the goal of the MCP server is to advertise to your coding agents the capabilities of the WireMock Cloud platform and how your chat agents or AI agents can interface with WireMock Cloud to get things done in lightning fast time. So I've got a bunch listed out here. Not all of them necessitate going into any detail because you're not going to be calling these directly. You're going to be, kind of referencing them just through natural language when you're talking with your AI chat agents. And I'll showcase some of that today. But you can see that we now have some get and put operations for both OpenAPI and GraphQL, schema, and definition files. We can ask the chat agent to look and interrogate the request journal, even reset that request journal. And then we have an exciting set of capabilities that you see: start recording, get recording status, stop recording, and capture a record event, which is going to unlock some new use cases that we'll cover today. There's also a new command, we'll just leave it at command, called lookup documentation. This is a real interesting one. We found, and as you've seen in one of our prior WireMock live sessions, that sometimes the AI coding agents can get tripped up if we don't give them a verbose enough prompt. They might start to, that agent might start to reference the WireMock open source documentation and try to build mappings files rather than using the APIs of WireMock Cloud to interact with it. With this lookup documentation command, what we've done at WireMock Cloud is put in a large set of pre-configured instructions that are actually embedded inside of the MCP server for the AI agents to reference. So these are directives instructing the AI agents on how to actually use WireMock Cloud. And when someone asks for mocking, that it knows to interface with the MCP tool that communicates with WireMock Cloud. And we're not talking about WireMock open source. It also contains best practices on how mock API should be named, how the stubs should be built, guidance on things like the priority system, dynamic response templating. A whole host of information is really baked into this lookup documentation command. Now, I will point out that most chat agents or AI agents will know to do this automatically to reference documentation. But we can kind of influence the AI agents to make sure that it references the documentation via this lookup documentation command by prompting it or adding to our prompt lookup documentation before proceeding. Now, I've got a typo in my slide here that I need to fix, but that command is just instructing the AI to really make sure it references that baked-in documentation before it decides what it's going to do. The last one on here, as far as the new MCP tools, is make HTTP request. So this has a couple of capabilities to it. I'll show one of them today on how this particular directive is used for a particular prompt and use case. But what's also interesting about this make HTTP request is that you can configure the WireMock CLI via a config file to make sure that it has all of the information that it needs. So for example, if we're going against a third-party API that requires an authorization header to be sent in any requests to it, if our AI agent needs to actually make live calls to the real system to do something that I'll show you called API discovery, we need to instruct it to make sure that there is a valid token in there. So you can see I just have an example here. It's an authenticators section inside of the YAML file of config.yaml. It's instructing the WireMock CLI that anytime it needs to interface with the fully qualified domain name req.res.in for request response.in, that it needs to supply a header token. That header needs to be x-api-key, and then the value that should be sent in that header would be request response -free -version 1. So this is just a quick example on how we can use this configuration file. At the time, we are still working on the final documentation of this particular config file and all of the additional capabilities that we can supply to the WireMock CLI. So stay tuned for that to show up inside of our docs. Now, as a quick review, and maybe some additional use cases that you might have not read any of our blogs or seen some of the new videos on our YouTube channel that our CTO and co-founder Tom has been pushing out, I wanted to just list some of the most common use cases for using the MCP server along with your WireMock cloud platform. So first and foremost, one we've showed before is discovering your application's API dependencies and automatically creating mock APIs for them. So we've got our code. It relies on some upstream APIs as dependencies. We want to mock those. We can simply ask our coding agent to review our code, look for upstream API dependencies, and create mock APIs automatically for us. Another common use case here is to rapidly prototype new application functionality by having the AI enhance your application code, and also to prototype any new APIs that would need to exist for this prototype functionality to work. From here, we can see what is built by our coding agent, play around with it, get it into maybe a minimal viable product kind of state before handing off the assets that WireMock Cloud builds for us automatically in open API schema definition files, developer documentation, as well as the playground that comes along with that REST-based mock API when we create one. Another interesting one and a newer use case, there is a corresponding video for this inside of our YouTube channel, is converting a stateless mock into a stateful one. Hopefully, you're all aware of the stateful capabilities at this point inside of WireMock Cloud. Our customers have given us tremendous feedback on how valuable this feature is. And admittedly, taking a stateless mock to a stateful one by hand, it takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of time to do. Well, we can actually ask our AI agent to help us with this chore and take a look at a mock that is currently stateless and convert it to a stateful one. Another exciting newer use case is fixing mock drift. So we've heard from customers, right, that, yeah, WireMock is great. We can solve for our immediate dependencies, especially third-party dependencies. But where the challenge comes is as that API continues through its iterations, its revisions, its updates, its new functionality, sometimes our mock APIs drift away from the real API. Well, with a current open API contract of a service, maybe from a vendor or maybe internally, we can ask our AI coding agent to investigate an existing mock API along with the most recent open API contract, detect if there is any drift between the two, and fix our existing mocks so that they now conform to the most recent open API contract. Two other ones here. We can use our chat agents to add additional data scenarios to an existing mock API. So maybe we have just a few data scenarios and we're interested in creating a larger data set of varied responses coming back, or negative scenarios, edge case scenarios. We can ask our coding assistants to help us with this as well. And the last one, I did showcase this on one of the previous WireMock lives, is asking our agent to interrogate the mock API and our consumer code to understand why the mock API isn't behaving the way we expect it to. So with a quick prompt of asking our coding agent to do this investigation, it can do that triage and then offer changes to the mock API so that it conforms or mirrors the way that our consumer is expecting it to behave, or vice versa. We can have our consuming logic updated to reflect the current state of an existing mock API. So these are just common MCP server use cases that we hear customers are getting a lot of value at. We have videos for most of these, again, available inside of our YouTube library. So one of the next items that we want to cover today that does have a demo, we'll look at this live, is the API discovery use case that I mentioned just a few moments ago. So what are we doing here, right? The use case is a lot of times developers are interacting with live APIs. Those live APIs might not be documented at all or documented very well, and they just don't really have a good understanding of how to use a particular API. They don't have that complete picture. And they also might want to mock for it. And without proper documentation or a good understanding of how the API works, it's very difficult to create a mock. So the solution here is to use AI to explore the real API and then create a mock API along with that documentation portal and the embedded playground to that documentation portal. So we let AI do the crawling of a live API, understand how it works, what are valid data scenarios, what are not valid data scenarios, and then automatically generate those developer assets for us so that we can very quickly get a better handle on this API that we need to code against. So with that, let's showcase a demonstration of this. I'm going to pull up this window here. Let's go ahead and maximize it. Let's go ahead and clear this thing here. And we're going to begin our journey between this state and our WireMock live open API mock API that's open on my screen here. So we can see there's no stubs in here right now. If we go to the Open API screen, the Open API document is rather blank. So we'll come back over the stubs and let's see what we can do in regards to this use case. Now, I need to pull up my other screen here as well that got hidden for me. There we go, perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure I'm in the right directory here for my demonstration. Looks like we are in my MCP demos directory. That's great. Let's go ahead and what am I doing here? Let's go ahead and I'm going to issue a command first. So remember, I told you and I showed you an example of configuring the WireMock CLI so that a request to a particular fully qualified domain name would get some crazy copy paste stuff here. Excuse me, I can't talk and copy and paste today at the same time. Let's try this one more time. Okay, just gonna have to manually edit this here for us. So all I'm doing here is I am going to append that authorization information that I showed you on the slide a little bit earlier to my existing config.yaml file. Now, while I would love to show you that that change has been made, inside my config.yaml file is also my API key. So I'm going to try to avoid showing that and recording that into the demo today. So all I've done here is taking that little stanza that I showed you before, that authorizations stanza, which said for this particular fully qualified domain name, make sure you send a header with this particular string. that contains the value of the API key. So that's what this command just did. It added that to that. Let's make sure I'm logged in to the WireMock CLI. So I'll do the classic WireMock who am I to ensure that I'm still logged in to WireMock Cloud. We can see I am logged into WireMock Cloud. That's all tied together. Great. And now I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my coding agent, today we're going to use Claude. Man, I don't know what's going on with copy paste today. So let's go ahead and do Claude MCP list, where this is going to ask our Claude development environment to list all of the MCP servers that are currently configured into it. We can see I've already taken the step of making sure that my Claude environment is configured with the WireMock MCP server and it's connected. So we're good. So let's open up Claude at this point. In the past, I've used Cursor on our demonstrations. This is more of a command line interface for interacting with a coding agent. This is becoming more and more popular across the development teams out there. So I've chosen to use this one today in our demonstration. So I'm going to go ahead and copy my prompt here, and we'll review that prompt before I hit enter. So we can see we're going to ask our AI coding agent here to crawl the request response API that has a base URL of https:/requestresponse.in/API. And we want to pump that into mock API with the ID of YVQ0Z. And that just happens to be this one right here, right? The one that we were looking at that we see is currently empty. Now, I did decide to go ahead and tell it to make sure it looks up documentation. So this looking up documentation will kind of look at all the other keywords and figure out inside of that baked in documentation of the MCP server what's applicable to actually guide the AI and what it needs to do. And then I've also supplied just a few URL paths that I know about. As I said, we might have a little bit of understanding about what the API is, but not necessarily what the schema is, what are the required and optional attributes that need to go into all of these. But I do know that there's a user's path. There's a user's path where we can pass in an ID. There's also a register path and a login path. So I'll go ahead and I'll hit enter on this, and this shouldn't take too long to complete, but we'll see that, first thing it's doing is it's looking up that documentation. And it's understanding that there's a crawling APIs command or documentation in there. It now understands what it needs to do. It's going to start a recording session using one of these new helpers in the MCP. Then it's going to start firing off requests using that make HTTP request, ensuring that it has the headers that I said were needed in that configuration file that we talked about earlier. So it's going to go ahead and capture that information, make requests, the recording session's going on. It's going to do that for each one of these known endpoints that we referenced. And this should only take a moment or two more for it to complete, and then we'll be able to see the fruits of the AI agent's labor here and our prompting of what happened. So looks like we might just have one more coming up here. I'm going to look at my screen and see we don't have any questions. I'll just remind everybody, if you have any questions, drop them into that Q&A chat right here. Ethan will be monitoring it, and hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the tail end to take a look at that. So you'll see our to-dos have now been updated. We're stopping the recording session. It's discovered that there are users endpoints. Those are all gets. There's a pagination feature to the user's endpoint. We can see that there's also for the user's endpoint with the user ID, we can pull back individual users. We can even pull back a non-existent user and see what a 404 message looks like. And then you also see the same for the authentication endpoints. Now, if I flip back over to our mock API and we hit refresh, we should see that we now have a mock API that's been built for us thanks to that crawling. And it's supporting, right, that page 1, page 2 kind of approach that we saw per pages. We've got these various stubs. And if we come over to the Open API definition file or documentation for this same one, it's been auto-updated for us. And we can see here's our get API users. We can ask for page 1, get a valid response there, ask for page 2, right? And we can see that that's behaving as we'd intend it to. We can pull back individual users. Here's our user 1. Here's our user 2, right? So on and so forth. If we give our user 23, we can get our 404 not found. So these assets that have been built for us, not only do we now have a representation of this live API as a mock API where we can start to add additional data scenarios to it, but we've started to get this playground and this developer documentation built for us automatically, filling that gap and giving us a better understanding of that live API that we didn't really know too well before. So this is one of those new exciting use cases wanted to make sure we shared with you today on WireMock Live. Now, another one I want to show you as far as a demo as well is one of the CLI updates. So there is a common use case from our customers that, recordings don't always happen against a single API at a given time. We might want to record multiple API dependencies for our consuming application, all in parallel. So we can do that in one swoop. Now, you could do this by spinning up multiple WireMock CLIs in different command prompt windows, but you can't do this in the UI, right? The UI allows us to have that one recorder running at a given time. So we've updated the WireMock CLI to allow for recording multiple APIs simultaneously. And this is using the record many argument on the command line. So let's hop over into another screen over here, and I will showcase what is happening here. So I have probably a pretty familiar application for us all. If I come back over into our weather dashboard, we've seen this before where we have a weather application that's connected to live APIs. We ask our chat, our coding agent to help us mock those dependent APIs. And we also, showcased how we could add prototype additional functionality, like by adding a quote of the day module to our existing application. So in this state, what we have right now is an application that is talking to the live APIs. And if we come over to our configuration set, when we actually use the record many option on the WireMock CLI, we need to supply a configuration file. That configuration file looks like this that I'm showcasing here. So you'll notice this YAML file defines 3 different endpoints that I want to interact with. We're going to define what type of mock API we want the recorder to create, whether that is REST or that's the unstructured, maybe it's GraphQL. What do we want the mock API to be called inside of WireMock Cloud when it's created? What's the local port that WireMock Cloud will open up, or I'm sorry, the WireMock CLI will open up to actually do the recording on? And then where are we going to send that? Where are we going to send that real traffic to? What's the live server? So I've got one live server here in ipapi.com, another one at api.weatherapi.com, and then a last one here, which is a mock representation of that quote API. Now, I ran this a little bit earlier. I'm going to go ahead and delete these cloud IDs so that we can create brand new mock APIs, not update any existing ones. So I'll go ahead and I'll save this recording piece here. Now, the other piece of this is configuring my application to point to our recording ports, right, and pieces. So most applications have a configuration file. Mine is environment.local here, where we can specify the URL for recording, right? A lot of times you just have a single URL configuration where we could modify this to point to the recorder, which will be running at localhost 8080 for the weather API, 8081 for the location API, 8082 for the quote API. So all these pieces are in place now. We can actually start the recorder. So let's see if where did my command prompt window go? Let's go down here. There we go. Let's clear that. And I'm going to issue a, looks like I lost it. Maybe it's in this one here. There we go. This command. So WireMock, as in the WireMock CLI, we're going to use that new command, record many, and then we're going to pass it the argument, the configuration argument of environment-config-file. And then where does this configuration file actually live? It lives here in record.yaml. So we can go ahead and start this. And we'll get some feedback from the WireMock CLI telling us that requests are being recorded at this point. We've got 3 services. The targets that they're going to, we have a mixture of HTTP and HTTPS. And what is the local recording port that WireMock CLI has opened up for us? With all of that, I should be able to go back over to my application. Let's go ahead and give this a refresh, and still behaving the way I expect it to. We can see it's pulling up a nearby locality from where I'm recording this in my home office. It's pulling up a Chinese proverb there. I can refresh this. Best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. And we're seeing we've got some randomized quotes coming up. Now it's another one here from Eleanor Roosevelt. Coming back over to our command prompt window over here, we can see that all that traffic has now flowed through the WireMock CLI recorder with the record many. And when we're done, we can go ahead and hit enter, and these assets should be processed for us. And then we'll see that these stubs are being created and the mock IDs that are associated with them. So when we come back over to WireMock Cloud and we take a look at the mock APIs, and we clear our filter here, we can see just as we've configured in our configuration file, we have our 3 mock APIs automatically created for us via the recording mode. And that was all done in parallel. All right, just a couple more things until we can wrap up here and take any questions that might have come in. A few more updates on the WireMock CLI. There's also additional configurations that we can supply inside of that config file. These are documented. The full schema you can find today in the WireMock CLI documentation section of our website. A couple of other interesting capabilities that you might want to think about using. One are filtering rules. So oftentimes we might not want to actually have all of the transactions flowing through the recorder be converted into stubs. We might want to let some of them go. Maybe that is Google Analytics, or any 404s aren't of interest to us. We can use the import config file to decide which API calls, what paths to accept and ignore after recording is complete, thereby throwing away all the information that we're not interested in, not having to go into the recording and delete stuff later. We can take care of that with these filtering rules. We also have post-processing rules, and a very interesting one to highlight, one of the many, is the capability to influence the matching logic that is used inside of the stubs that are created. So for any of you that have used the recorder and recorded posts to a REST endpoint, you'll notice that the default behavior of both the recorder in the UI and the WireMock CLI is to be a JSON body matcher, a strict JSON static body matcher, where the post needs to be the exact same every time. Well, usually the first step in post-processing or recording by hand is to probably put a little bit more dynamicism into the matching logic. Maybe some JSON unit ignores, right? Or in the case of XML, those XML unit ignore style of statements. Maybe even switching over to JSON path instead. We don't care about all of the attributes or all of the data in the post body. I mean, there might just be 1 or 2 that we need to key off of to decide what the right response is in our matching logic. That last example is a classic example for using one of these post-processing rules where you can use a filter for posts, maybe to a specific endpoint, and decide, I don't want a static JSON body match for these. Instead, I want to use a JSON path for, just pick one, $.user_ID. And that should be making sure that there's a $.user_ID and that it exists. Not that it's a specific value, maybe just that it exists, right? Either one of those you can specify inside of these post-processing rules. Take a look at this if this is of interest to you via the documentation. Like I said, we do have that schema file that's on there. If you're not comfortable working with schema files to really understand the power and the flexibility of these filtering rules and post-processing rules, do not hesitate to reach out to us via any of the normal mechanisms or mechanics, whether that is the in-product chat, if you have a Slack or Teams channel with us, or via email to Ethan or myself. Two more slides and then we'll wrap up. There's also a new, easier push and pull capability as part of the CLI updates. Now, I do have a mistake on the slide. This shouldn't be a sub-bullet of import config file, but that's fine. We'll fix that before we push this out. The push and pull commands now include additional capabilities. So first and foremost, push and pull fully support GraphQL mock APIs and OpenAPI style of mock APIs. So we would be pushing and pulling the GraphQL schema, and we would be pushing and pulling the API specification file. Now, what's real interesting is this watch command that's part of the push directive inside of the WireMock CLI. The use case here is oftentimes we are developing on our local laptop, or we're pulling down code from source code control. And if we make a change to the GraphQL schema, or we make a change to the OpenAPI specification in our local development environment, wouldn't it be great if that could automatically be detected and then pushed up to a new or existing mock API? Well, that's exactly what the watch command will allow us to do. And then on the pull side, of course, we might want to retrieve the schema or the OpenAPI specification and pull that into our local development environment to make sure we have the latest and greatest that WireMock Cloud is also using, and then decide how to progress further, whether it is changing our code or checking in that freshly pulled document from WireMock Cloud. The last thing that I want to just advertise and put out there is that we are now offering a free WireMock Cloud self-paced training. So many of you have probably taken some training, instructor-led training, typically driven by me, I think always driven by me, within the last couple of years. Well, we've recognized that sitting through hour-long recorded sessions, if you couldn't attend those live, or trying to find a specific place in recorded sessions could be difficult, and that our users would really we're looking for some self-paced training, modularized self-paced training. So in here, you'll find the classic instructor-led training coupled with videos from our WireMock Cloud Academy that has a full learning path that will constantly be updated as we roll out new features and capabilities in the platform. And you can also stay tuned for an official certification exam to be added to this free self-paced training, and also badges if you are a badge collector and like to advertise your accomplishments in your professional profiles. Those will all be coming in the very near future. With that, I'll ask Ethan if there are any questions here before we wrap up today's session.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. That was great. I know we are close to time, so I don't think we'll have time to get through everything, but there's a couple questions I think would be good to clarify. One question we got was, are the APIs created through the MCP server the same as APIs created through the UI? Are there any, I guess it means like, are there any differences in how they behave, or are they functionally the same?
Yeah, that is a great question. So the answer is they are functionally the same. So ultimately what's happening under the hood your AI chat agents, right? Are they understand the WireMock cloud APIs and how those APIs are used to create assets, maintain assets, interact with assets that are hosted inside of the platform and the account that you have access to inside the platform. So fundamentally, what's created by the AI coding agents is exactly the same thing that you would be doing, whether you're doing it inside on the UI or you're issuing the API commands yourself via a curl command or a bash script that you built. So they're one and the same, functionally the same, structurally the same.
Perfect. And the other question we'll try to sneak in here at the end. I'll take this. Who is this available for? So this is all widely released. If you're watching this, you can go use it today. If you sign up for a new account, you will be on an enterprise trial plan for a month and you'll have unlimited usage of everything. If you're a current customer, you have unlimited usage of everything. After the month, if you're on a free plan, there are some limits in what you can do in terms of importing, exporting, and consuming your APIs. You can find those in our pricing page, but everything you just saw is usable today. So we highly encourage you to go check it out and then reach out to let us know what you think. And I think that will do it for time today. So thank you again for joining. We do this about monthly, so keep an eye out for the next session when we post it. We'd love to see you there or even sign up, even if you can't make it, just so you get that recording after the fact. All right, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks all.